And I think again, when those opportunities do come, you have to have the confidence to put yourself out there. Even if you think they're gonna say no, you truly don't know. Like I said, when I applied for the Mariners thing, I was like, well, I'll just put my name in there and see what happens, because I had already been told before, applying for baseball that, you're too young, you don't have enough experience yet. And I said, okay, perfect. Well, I'll get more experience. So I was like, well, let me just try it again and see what happens.
What about in terms of plan of care? When you are, I'm not sure how your organization, approach the individual treatment. Are you assigned to take care of specific players, or almost like a team approach? Like someday this individual may see you, but someday see other PTs or trainers, in a sense. And if the individual, how do you make that, more like collaborative, plan of care?
Yeah, so we, again, I'm speaking to our organization only. We do a very collaborative approach. And so we all kind of treat everybody. And so there's some days where I might treat player A, B, and C. My coworker treats, players X, Y, and Z, and then we might switch the next day. It just kind of, it's not like a plan of like, oh, I'm gonna treat these people, you treat these people, and then we'll switch. It's kind of just how it comes. But every week, prior to the next week, we sit down on like a Thursday or Friday, and we kind of go through plan of care for the next week. What overall kind of goals are for, this player, where they're progressing to throwing, where they're progressing to with running, hitting, whatever it may be, overarching goals. And then we actually have a specific plan of care as well. And so then we'll go through every single player, and we'll create a plan of care, with, the so-called PT exercises, any type of movement prep activation stuff they need to do and get achieved before they actually go out to the field. Their distances for throwing, their volume for hitting, whether they're base running or not, all that kind of stuff. And then obviously strength and conditioning takes care of the lifting and conditioning. And then, like I said, then they come back in, and then they'll complete any sort of type of PT specific stuff. Yeah.
And this is probably true in so many different situations. But typically, how long does it usually take to go through that, discussion, kind of creating that mutual plan of care, weekly basis?
Again, I think it depends on volume, right, of people you have in rehab. I would say roughly, it doesn't take long, just because my coworkers and I have become so comfortable with it and comfortable with each other that usually I don't think it takes more than an hour.
I see. And probably some daily communications there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like exactly what you said. Like, we definitely like to communicate then and loop in strength and conditioning and stuff like that. That way they can plan for the next week as well, right? And saying, hey, this guy shouldn't be doing any upper plyos or any sort of, X, Y, and Z involving the arms, And so then they can go into their strength and conditioning programs and make changes and stuff like that. And then we can kind of go from there, and there's always constant communication every day. Yeah.
I like that. Austin, that's a great information. And learning from you at the same time, putting what I have observed in the past for any type of teams. Doesn't have to be physical therapy team or medical team, any type of teams. The strongest team, greatest team has a great communication on the daily communication. Doesn't have to be the writing or formal meeting, but more like even chatting, just exchanging some words. But everybody at least has some type of good understanding even before going to the meeting. So that when we go to the meeting, lots of great things accomplished in such a more efficient and effective manner. So this is true for physical therapists. Doesn't have to work for the specific teams, but when you are collaborating outside of your work setting, coaches, athletic trainers, physicians, parents, so that more constant communication, more frequent communication, that really helps to actually work as a team. Collaborative work, communication is one of the key.
Absolutely.
So Austin, so you completed the first year working as a physical therapist for the Mariners. What is the biggest thing you learned this entire year?
Yeah, again, I don't mean to be repetitive, but I think the communication aspect is one of the biggest things. You know, I think there's a preach behind over communication, honestly. And because I don't ever want to set my strength coach up or my boss or my coworker PT to be in a situation where they didn't expect something and the player presents something new, or they get asked a question from someone higher up, you know, how is this player doing, or why is this player doing this? And if my boss or someone else doesn't have that answer right away and it surprises them, it's just a direct reflection of me, right? And I feel bad about that stuff. So I try my hardest to over communicate everything. Sometimes way too much, but I think it's important. Just, you know,
great, yeah.
I don't think there's, in this type of setting, I truly don't believe that there is too much communication. You know, these guys, ultimately, like I said, we're trying to win a World Series. That's the organization's goal every single year. And so, you know, I have to be crystal clear with my communication if I'm gonna, you know, provide a guy to be a piece of that end goal.
That's great. And making an assumption will create a gap between the understanding.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's great. Awesome. So Austin, what were the challenges you encountered this year working in the sports organization?
To me, I feel like one of the biggest challenges was the overall kind of comfort in a new professional setting, right? I feel like it's kind of a similar experience to like coming out of school and starting your first job, right? You're now a professional. You're trying to figure out who you are. You're not trying to step on toes per se, but you're also trying to bring what you offer to the table. And so I feel like the first couple months, there's just a lot to learn with the flow of an organization, right? And then especially too, you add on the fact that I started in January, 2 months before spring training. There was a lockout, you know, there was just a lot of stuff going on. And so like, for me, like a lot of the flow from the day to day, and also like the communication of like taking this and this piece of information and who I should relay that to, who should I all include on this email, you know, that was a big learning curve for me. But as the year goes, obviously you get a little more familiar with that kind of stuff, and you get, you know, way more comfortable. But I think the other big challenge for me too is really seeing how far you can push these guys. You know, during the season, again, you see them 6 days a week. It's way different than an outpatient setting where you're seeing someone from 1 to 3 times a week, maybe once every other week or once a week, whatever it may be. You know, you're seeing this person 6 days a week, and you have to be able to occupy their time with valuable therapeutic intervention and guidance and progression, and being able to understand too that like you want to get this person back as fast as possible. The organization wants them back as fast as possible. The player wants to be back as fast as possible, but also being able to kind of look at yourself in the mirror and also be the kind of voice on your shoulder saying like, hey, you understand a little bit about like the body and their respective tissue and healing and all that kind of stuff, and what is required with progression, and being able to take into ultimately the care, like the overarching care of that player, right? And being able to sometimes be that voice of reason where someone's saying, hey, we need him back today, and you have the knowledge and confidence to be like, no, he's not ready yet, you know? And that's a tough thing to do, especially that first time. You're like, no, you know? And they're like, excuse me? And you're like, no, and they're like, well, why? And then you give them very valid reasons, but again, you gotta have that confidence, you know?
Right.
So that's a big challenge for me, you know, rather than just being like, oh, you want him back? Okay, here you go, kind of thing. Even though I don't think he is ready, but sure, okay, you want him back. You know, I think that's a big thing too.
That's great. So many great wisdom there. One is, in order to make your decisions, you have to have valid reason, more like certain kind of criteria in a way that is based on the principles. at the same time, if you believe on something so passionately, you have to stand up and speak up. We're done.
Yeah.
What about Austin? Just looking back this year, what were your biggest accomplishment or things you are proud of yourself?
I think one of my biggest accomplishments was just developing a very good rapport with a lot of guys. I came in as the new guy, and a lot of people didn't know who I am, obviously, or didn't trust me. Especially they asked me, "Oh, what organization were you with before this?" And I say, this is my first baseball job, and some guys kind of look down upon that. And so I think being able to have a good amount of guys come through rehab, I'm able to develop a relationship to them, with them, and kind of and show what I can offer to them to make them better, and ultimately again contribute to that goal of winning World Series. It's kind of cool to see how those relationships evolve, and I think that was probably one of my biggest accomplishments is being able to get to know guys at a little more personal level, and being able to be like a trusted voice of reason for them, and like we kind of talked with, being able to recommend something that maybe the player doesn't agree with, or the team or the coaches. Again, we're the medical side, so I'm going to give my opinion honest, whether you like it or not. And I think ultimately a player truly respects that. Even sometimes if they don't agree with it, at the end of the day, they're going to be like, "You're right," kind of thing. And it might take them a couple months.
Right,
it might take them
right.
a couple months to realize that, but it's truly a rewarding thing when they come back and they're saying, "Yeah, you were right."
Yeah, because you are able to see things, then you have a valid reason, then you spoke up because you care about the athletes. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Then also you said a great thing, like when you join that new organization, you want to earn the trust, not from the staff members, definitely from the athlete clients. And in order to do so, what you didn't do was you are just showing off what you know, what you are capable of, but you are there to put yourself in the position to provide the help, to understand them. So that is kind of similar to what you just said, like when you came to the clinical internship, also when you apply the job, even job interviews. Because I feel like they're so connected. So
Totally.
yeah, so cool.
Thank you.
Yes. So do you have anything else you want to add to, from the experience working for the Mariners?
Yeah. I think with baseball, again, specifically, there's just so many elements and dimensions that kind of happen within an organization, right? Baseball is so big. There's 200 plus guys, players alone in an organization. You got people from all over the world. You got people speaking different languages, and sometimes it's just chaotic. Like there's just so much going on and stuff like that. But again, taking the time to even just be able to like converse with someone in Spanish is like I think such a big important part and stuff like that. And granted, most of the time it sounds gibberish coming from me, and the point doesn't always get across. So sometimes there needs to be help or something like that. But like I appreciate when guys like try to converse in English, and I know they equally appreciate when I try to converse in Spanish, So it's little things like that, how you can gain people's trust and confidence in you, I think that kind of sets people apart rather than just being, avoiding the uncomfortable, right? And ultimately, if you can kind of address that and go head on into that uncomfortableness, I think it creates great relationships with players, coworkers, your organization, everything. Yeah.
I like that. Knowing my experience coming from Japan and came to this country, the people who try to speak trying to use some Japanese phrase to me, I felt so appreciated,
Yeah.
Then I see same thing when we have Japanese baseball players or Asian baseball player coming from their countries coming to our location. Then, our coaches, our therapists, even just speaking some phrases of their languages, they are like so appreciated.
Yeah.
Almost like they are getting out of their way to trying to establish some common mutual ground with them. So those are great.
Yeah.
So Austin, before closing, do you have any final remarks or take-home message for the viewers who are interested in pursuing sports medicine?
So yeah, I think there again needs to just be that element of patience that you have to have, whether you want to get into a clinic that specializes in sports med or a pro sports team. Those fields are far and few between, and I think again when those opportunities do come, you have to have the confidence to put yourself out there. Even if you think they're gonna say no, you truly don't know. Like I said, when I applied for the Mariners thing, I was like, well, I'll just put my name in there and see what happens, because I had already been told before, applying for baseball that, you're too young, you don't have enough experience yet. And I said, okay, perfect. Well, I'll get more experience. So I was like, well, let me just try it again and see what happens. And, it works out, and so, be persistent, ask questions, find the right opportunities. There's always going to be someone that's willing to help. Whether it's a mentor, whether it's a brand new clinic, whether you're folding towels for so just try to do whatever you can to set yourself up to be in that successful position. So when that time comes where a job is offered to you or it becomes available, you feel confident that you are the candidate for that position. And then last thing, you just have to go and prove it, and show them your characteristics of how you can fit into that team, and most importantly, just be a human.
Awesome. Thank you, Austin, for sharing your experience and wisdom with us. And I personally feel inspired and encouraged, and I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. You've been a huge part of it, so I really appreciate everything you've done for me.
Well, thank you for watching. If you like this channel, please hit the subscribe and hit the like button. And Austin, ready? Positive vibes only. Don't baby.